One quiet morning on a deserted country road, Caleb Sanders, a kind-hearted, humble handyman, stopped to help a stranger stranded with a flat tire. To him, it was just a small act of kindness, nothing remarkable. But the next morning, a sleek black SUV appeared outside his house, carrying an unusual offer from a billionaire family. This unexpected twist would set him on a journey that would change not only his own life, but the entire small town of Pine Hill. But could he handle the price of his own compassion? It was a crisp autumn morning in Pine Hill, a town nestled between stretches of farmland and winding roads. Caleb Sanders, a local handyman with a gentle smile and a heart that never hesitated to help, was heading home after finishing an early job of fixing fences and tending to odd jobs around town. Pine Hill was a close-knit place, the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business and news traveled fast. As Caleb drove down a quiet stretch of road on the outskirts of town, his headlights caught the figure of a woman standing next to a car with its hazard lights flashing. She was stranded, struggling with a flat tire on the desolate road. Caleb's sense of duty kicked in immediately. Without a second thought, he pulled over, grabbed his flashlight, and walked toward her car. "Morning, ma'am," he called out, approaching with a friendly smile. "Need a hand with that tire?" The woman, probably in her late 20s, looked up with a mixture of relief and surprise. She wore a sleek black coat that seemed out of place against the rugged backdrop of Pine Hill's country road, her expression revealing both exhaustion and gratitude. "Oh, thank goodness," she sighed, her voice carrying a touch of sophistication that Caleb wasn't used to hearing. "I've been out here for nearly an hour. I don't know the first thing about changing a tire." Caleb chuckled, his warm smile putting her at ease. "Well, lucky for you, I've changed more tires than I can count. Name's Caleb, by the way." "Anna," she replied, her own smile growing as she offered a handshake. "Thank you, Caleb. I don't know what I would have done without you." Caleb got to work, grabbing the tools from her trunk and kneeling beside the car. As he worked, they chatted about the town, the upcoming harvest festival, and the weather. Though Anna didn't reveal much about herself. She seemed grateful but kept her responses polite and guarded, as if there were things she preferred to keep private. When he finished, Caleb tested the tire, giving it a final tug to ensure it was secure. "All done. You're good to go," he announced, standing up and brushing the dust from his hands. Anna looked at him with an appreciative smile, her expression softening. "Thank you, Caleb. Really, it's rare to find someone who's so willing to help a stranger these days." Caleb shrugged, flashing her a humble grin. "Just doing what's right. You take care out there." They exchanged a few more polite words before Anna drove off, disappearing into the distance. Caleb climbed back into his truck, feeling satisfied with the good deed. To him, it was just another morning in Pine Hill, another act of kindness that came as naturally as breathing. He drove home, unaware that this simple act would set off a chain of events that would turn his life and his town upside down. The next morning, Caleb woke up to an unusual sight. Parked across the street from his small, worn-out house was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, a vehicle that looked as though it belonged in a big city, not in the humble streets of Pine Hill. Caleb frowned, curiosity tinged with apprehension creeping into his mind. As he stood on his porch, sipping his coffee, he noticed two men step out of the SUV. They were dressed in sharp suits, their expressions serious as they made their way toward him. Caleb's heart quickened. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, and the men approaching him didn't look like they were here for a friendly chat. "Mr. Sanders?" one of the men asked, his voice firm but polite. Caleb nodded, setting his coffee mug down. "That's me. And you are?" "My name is Mr. Langston, and this is my associate, Mr. Green," the man said, gesturing to his partner. "We represent the Montgomery family. I believe you met Miss Anna Montgomery last night on the Pine Hill Road?" Recognition dawned on Caleb. Anna, the stranded woman he'd helped, was a Montgomery. The Montgomery family was known far and wide. They owned a global conglomerate and were one of the wealthiest families in the state. Caleb felt a jolt of surprise, quickly masked by his natural humility. "I did, yeah. She had a flat tire," Caleb replied, trying to keep his tone casual. Mr. Langston gave a slight nod, his expression one of reserved approval. "Indeed. Miss Montgomery is Mr. Richard Montgomery's only daughter. She spoke very highly of your assistance and insisted that we find you to express the family's gratitude. Caleb was taken aback. Oh well, it was no trouble really, just lending a hand. Mr. Green, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. Mr. Sanders, the Montgomery family would like to extend their appreciation by offering you a reward. A significant one, at that. Caleb's brows shot up. A reward? For changing a tire? It felt excessive, and he couldn't shake the unease that crept into his chest. He was a simple man, unaccustomed to wealth or grand gestures, and the idea of accepting money for a small act of kindness didn't sit right with him. Look, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I feel comfortable taking a reward. I was just helping someone in need, Caleb said, scratching his head. Mr. Langston gave him a shrewd look, sensing his hesitation. The Montgomery family is known for their generosity, Mr. Sanders. Miss Montgomery was quite insistent, and I believe you'll find their gratitude most beneficial. Caleb shifted his weight, caught in a moment of indecision. The idea of accepting a reward felt strange, but he knew his town and his neighbors could use the support, especially with the challenges they faced. Pine Hill had always been his heart and home, a place where people took care of one another. Maybe this was an opportunity to do something meaningful, something that went beyond himself. Well, he began slowly, if this reward could be used to help the town somehow, maybe we can work something out. Mr. Langston and Mr. Green exchanged a glance, as if they had anticipated this answer. Very well, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Langston said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. If you're open to discussion, we'd be happy to arrange a meeting with Mr. Montgomery to discuss the specifics. Caleb nodded, still feeling a bit overwhelmed but intrigued. He had no idea what was in store, but a part of him couldn't ignore the glimmer of possibility in this unusual turn of events. As the men climbed back into their SUV, Caleb watched them drive away, his mind spinning with questions and possibilities. He didn't know what the Montgomery family had in mind, but one thing was certain. His life, and the life of Pine Hill, was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated. The day after Caleb's encounter with Mr. Langston and Mr. Green, he received a call requesting a meeting at the Montgomery estate, a grand property known only to the wealthiest in the region. Caleb was no stranger to hard work and honesty, but he had never crossed paths with a family as powerful and influential as the Montgomerys. For him, helping others was second nature, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the whole situation seemed extravagant for something as simple as changing a tire. Still, he agreed to meet with them, curious to understand why this family was so insistent on rewarding him. Dressed in his best button-down shirt, Caleb felt out of place as he drove up the long, winding driveway to the Montgomery estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured lawns and fountains. Every detail screamed wealth and power. As he approached the entrance, he was greeted by Mr. Langston and escorted into an elegant study lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The air smelled faintly of leather and wood polish, and the grandeur of the room only heightened his sense of awe and slight discomfort. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Sanders," Mr. Langston said, gesturing for him to take a seat in a leather armchair across from the desk. Caleb nodded, settling awkwardly into the chair as he looked around. A few moments later, the door opened, and a tall man with silver hair and an air of authority entered the room. Caleb recognized him immediately from the photos he'd seen in the news. It was Richard Montgomery, the billionaire head of the family. "Mr. Sanders," Richard said, extending a hand with a slight smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I understand you helped my daughter, Anna, in a moment of need." Caleb stood and shook his hand, feeling both humbled and a bit overwhelmed. "It was nothing, Mr. Montgomery. She was stranded, and I just did what anyone would." Richard's smile broadened and he took a seat behind his desk. "Not everyone would have stopped, Mr. Sanders. It's rare to find someone willing to lend a hand without expecting anything in return. You displayed a kindness that moved my daughter deeply, and as a family, we believe in showing our appreciation." Caleb glanced down, feeling slightly embarrassed. "I appreciate that, sir, but really, I didn't do it for any reward." Richard leaned back, studying him with a keen, thoughtful gaze. "That's precisely why we'd like to offer you something meaningful. I understand you may not want a personal reward, so we have a different proposal, one that could benefit your town as well as you." Caleb's curiosity piqued, and he leaned forward slightly. "What kind of proposal?" Richard exchanged a glance with Mr. Langston before continuing. "We'd like to provide funding for community development in Pine Hill. I understand it's a small town with limited resources, and with our help, we could establish a community center, a scholarship fund, and additional services to improve quality of life." The words hit Caleb like a wave. A community center? Scholarships? Resources to uplift the town? It was far beyond anything he had ever imagined, and he felt a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation. That sounds incredible," Caleb replied, barely able to believe what he was hearing. "But why go to all this trouble for a place like Pine Hill?" Richard nodded, his expression softening. "My family has always valued kindness and compassion, Mr. Sanders. Sometimes, those values are lost in the world of business. When Anna told me about you, I saw an opportunity to help a community that's often overlooked, especially one with someone like you, willing to make a difference." Caleb sat quietly, absorbing the magnitude of the offer. The idea of transforming Pine Hill with projects that could lift the spirits and opportunities of its residents was overwhelming. For years, he'd watched the town struggle, its younger generation leaving for better prospects elsewhere, and its elderly population dwindling without much support. Here was a chance to make a real, lasting difference. He looked at Richard, his voice steady. "If I accept this, I'd want the focus to be on the community, on giving everyone a chance at something better. This shouldn't be about me." Richard smiled approvingly. "I expected nothing less. We'd be honored to work with you, Mr. Sanders. Our team will ensure that the resources are used exactly as you envision, under your guidance." Caleb nodded, his heart swelling with both excitement and the weight of the responsibility he was about to take on. "Then, I accept." The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning, discussions, and new faces as Caleb worked with the Montgomery team to lay the foundation for the community projects. A plan emerged to build a community center with recreational spaces, educational programs, and a small library. In addition, a scholarship fund would be established to support young people from Pine Hill who wished to pursue higher education. Word spread quickly through Pine Hill about the changes to come. Some residents were skeptical, others excited, and many simply curious to see if the rumors were true. For Caleb, this was a dream he hadn't dared to dream. The chance to give back to the town he loved was everything he'd hoped for, and more. One afternoon, while he was at the town square discussing the project with a group of volunteers, he noticed Anna Montgomery walking toward him. She wore a relaxed smile, a stark contrast to the polished woman he'd met on the roadside weeks before. "Caleb," she called, waving as she approached. "I just wanted to see how everything was going. I hear the community center is getting quite the buzz." Caleb grinned, scratching his head as he looked at the construction site nearby. "Yeah, it's moving along faster than I thought. People are, well, let's just say they're surprised." Anna laughed, her gaze warm. "You've done something extraordinary here. I just wanted to thank you again for stopping that night. I know it's not something you think of as heroic, but to me, it meant everything." Caleb felt his cheeks flush, unused to such sincere gratitude. "I just did what felt right. But thank you, Anna. I can't tell you how much this means to Pine Hill." They stood in silence, watching the workers move about, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Anna finally broke the silence, her tone more serious. "You know, there will be challenges. People might start expecting things from you or question your intentions. Not everyone understands kindness the way you do." Caleb nodded, aware of the truth in her words. "I've thought about that, but I've got a good support system here. Friends and neighbors I can count on. I'll make sure this stays about the town and the people who need it." Anna smiled, a glint of admiration in her eyes. "I believe you will, and if you ever need help, you know where to find me." As Anna left, Caleb felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't alone in this endeavor, and the support he'd found in Anna and the Montgomery family strengthened his resolve to see the project through. With the foundation set, Caleb faced a mix of hope and challenge as he took on his new role. The Montgomery family's generosity and trust in his vision gave him both the tools and the responsibility to help Pine Hill thrive. But Caleb knew that with this opportunity came expectations, both from himself and his community, and he was prepared to meet them. As he stood watching the community center's walls rise, he whispered a quiet promise to himself and his town. We're just getting started. As construction on the community center progressed, the small town of Pine Hill buzzed with excitement, but not everyone shared Caleb's vision. Word spread of the Montgomery family's involvement, and with it came rumors and speculation. Some questioned Caleb's intentions, others doubted the sincerity of a billionaire's interest in their humble town, and a few even wondered aloud if this generosity was a cover for something more sinister. One evening, as Caleb sat at the diner enjoying a quiet meal, his longtime friend and neighbor, Tom, joined him. Tom, a grizzled mechanic with a blunt personality, had known Caleb since they were kids, and he wasn't one to hold back his thoughts. So, Tom began, raising an eyebrow as he sipped his coffee. What's it like being the big hero of Pine Hill, huh? Turning this place into a Montgomery-sponsored paradise? Caleb chuckled, shaking his head. It's not like that, Tom. This is for everyone, for the town. We could use the help. Tom gave a skeptical grunt, setting down his coffee cup. I get that, but people are talking. They say you're getting too cozy with them rich folks, maybe forgetting where you come from. The words stung more than Caleb wanted to admit. I haven't forgotten anything. This isn't about money or prestige. It's about helping people. I'm just trying to give back. Tom studied him for a moment, his expression softening. I know, Caleb. I know your heart's in the right place. But people here, they're proud. They don't want to feel like some charity case. Just be careful, all right? Caleb nodded, grateful for Tom's honesty. I will. Thanks, Tom. The conversation left him deep in thought as he walked home that night. He had been so focused on the projects and the potential for positive change that he hadn't considered the skepticism and concerns his neighbors might have. He wanted to honor the trust that the Montgomery family had placed in him, but more than that, he wanted the people of Pine Hill to feel respected and empowered. The next day, Caleb met with the Montgomery team to discuss the plans in greater detail. They presented him with documents, budgets, and schedules, all of which made his head spin. He was a handyman, used to building with his hands and solving practical problems, not overseeing large projects with spreadsheets and financial forecasts. Richard Montgomery noticed Caleb's discomfort and offered him a reassuring smile. Caleb, I understand this is a lot to take in. We'll handle the logistical details, but your input and direction are invaluable. We're here to help bring your vision to life. Caleb nodded, grateful for Richard's guidance, but feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him. I just want to make sure we're doing what's best for Pine Hill. I don't want this to feel like some outsider swooping in to change things. Richard's expression grew thoughtful. That's precisely why I respect you, Caleb. You have a unique insight into your community's needs. If there's anything you feel uncomfortable with, speak up. This project should be a reflection of your values and the spirit of Pine Hill. The reassurance bolstered Caleb's resolve. He spent the next few days talking with residents, gathering their ideas and concerns, and incorporating their feedback into the plans. The more he involved the community, the more he realized how deeply people cared about the town's future. Caleb felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that this project was no longer just about buildings or scholarships. It was about honoring the people who made Pine Hill a home. As construction continued, Caleb spent more time visiting the site, lending a hand whenever possible. He enjoyed watching the community center take shape, brick by brick, and imagining the laughter and learning that would soon fill its walls. The scholarship fund was already generating interest among young residents, and several parents had approached Caleb, expressing their gratitude and excitement for their children's futures. One afternoon, while overseeing the work, Caleb noticed Anna Montgomery walking across the site. She waved, making her way over to him with a smile. Caleb, the place looks amazing, she said, glancing around at the framework of what would soon become the community's new hub. You're really making a difference here. Caleb shrugged, a modest smile tugging at his lips. Just doing my part. It wouldn't be possible without your family's support. Anna's expression softened. You know, my father always told me that real wealth isn't in money, but in the lives you touch. This place, it's a testament to that. Caleb was silent, letting her words sink in. He hadn't thought of it that way, but as he looked at the building and the bustling workers, he realized the truth in what she said. This project wasn't just a structure, it was a beacon of hope, a reminder that change could come even to a quiet town like Pine Hill. As the days passed, Caleb continued to pour his energy into the community projects. But with every step forward, he also encountered new challenges. Some residents, still skeptical, questioned his motives, while others voiced concerns over the growing influence of the Montgomery family in their affairs. Caleb began to understand that leading change wasn't just about vision, it was about balancing expectations and staying true to one's principles. One evening, while Caleb was closing up the site, he noticed an older man watching from the edge of the property. It was Mr. Harlan, a lifelong resident and one of the town's most respected elders. Caleb approached him with a friendly smile. "Evening, Mr. Harlan. Here to check on the progress?" Mr. Harlan nodded, his gaze steady. "I've lived in Pine Hill all my life, Caleb. Seen a lot of things come and go, but I've never seen something quite like this." He gestured toward the construction site. "Folks are wondering what's going to happen next." Caleb met his gaze, sensing the weight of Mr. Harlan's words. "I understand, sir. I just want what's best for everyone here. This isn't about changing Pine Hill. It's about giving back, about keeping this town alive and helping it thrive." Mr. Harlan's face softened. "I believe you, Caleb. But remember, this town is more than buildings and projects. It's the people, the stories, the history. Don't let anyone forget that." Caleb nodded, taking the elder's advice to heart. He knew he needed to find a way to keep Pine Hill's identity intact while embracing the positive changes the projects would bring. That night, Caleb sat on his porch, reflecting on all that had transpired since he'd helped Anna on that quiet road. He thought about the people of Pine Hill, their pride, their fears, and their hopes. He knew this project was bigger than himself, and with that came a responsibility he was only beginning to understand. He resolved to stay true to his values, to involve the community in every decision, and to ensure that these changes strengthened, rather than altered, the spirit of Pine Hill. This was his home, his heart, and he would do everything in his power to honor it. As the stars blinked above, Caleb felt a renewed sense of clarity. He was on the right path, and no matter the challenges, he would face them with the same kindness and humility that had led him here in the first place. The grand opening of the Pine Hill Community Center was an event the town would never forget. People of all ages gathered, curious and excited to see what this new chapter would bring. The building stood proudly in the heart of Pine Hill, its bright exterior symbolizing hope and growth for a community that had seen better days. Caleb, standing at the entrance, greeted everyone with a warm handshake or hug, his heart swelling with pride. He had never imagined that a simple act of kindness on the roadside could lead to this. A center that would serve as a safe space for learning, gathering, and support for his neighbors. As the ribbon was cut, cheers erupted, and Caleb couldn't help but smile. For him, this wasn't just a building, it was a promise he'd made to himself and to Pine Hill. The community center represented opportunity and resilience, a testament to what kindness and a shared vision could achieve. In the weeks that followed, the community center quickly became the beating heart of Pine Hill. Children filled the library, exploring shelves stacked with books donated by locals and nearby towns. The rec room was always busy, filled with young people playing games and making friends, and the classrooms buzzed with energy as residents attended workshops on everything from gardening to small business management. One evening, as Caleb was locking up, he noticed a small group of teenagers hanging around the entrance. They looked nervous, casting glances his way as if unsure whether they were welcome. "Hey there," Caleb called out with a friendly smile. "Y'all here to check out the center?" One of the boys, a lanky kid with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, shrugged. "We, weren't sure if it was okay for us to come. Figured this place was for, families and stuff." Caleb chuckled, shaking his head. "This place is for everyone. Come on in, see for yourselves." The teens exchanged glances, hesitant at first, but they followed Caleb inside. He showed them around, explaining the different areas and encouraging them to use the space. They soon relaxed, their initial skepticism fading as they explored the center, laughing and talking like any kids their age. Watching them, Caleb felt a surge of satisfaction. This was why he'd built the center, to give everyone a place where they felt they belonged. The scholarship fund, too, had started making an impact. Several young residents who'd once believed they had no choice but to leave town to pursue their dreams applied for the scholarships, hoping for a chance to build their futures close to home. Caleb had personally reviewed every application, and each story tugged at his heart. These kids were smart, driven, and filled with potential. They deserved a chance. One afternoon, Caleb gathered the scholarship recipients and their families for an awards ceremony at the community center. As he handed out the awards, he saw tears of joy and gratitude in the eyes of parents who'd feared their children's dreams were out of reach. Caleb's voice trembled as he congratulated each student, feeling as though he was handing them a piece of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Sanders," one young girl said, clutching her scholarship certificate with pride. "This means everything to me. I never thought I'd be able to go to college and make my family proud." Caleb smiled, blinking back his own tears. "You've earned this, Ellie. Go out there, learn everything you can, and bring it back to Pine Hill. This town needs people like you." Yet, as much as the community center and scholarship fund brought hope and joy, Caleb couldn't ignore the challenges that came with change. Some townsfolk, wary of the Montgomery family's involvement, continued to voice doubts. A few even accused Caleb of turning the town into a playground for outsiders. One day, as Caleb walked into the local grocery store, he overheard a conversation between two older men he'd known for years. Their words stung more than he cared to admit. "Who does he think he is, bringing in big city money and changing things? Pine Hills never needed fancy buildings and scholarships to get by," one of them muttered. "Yeah," the other agreed. "Feels like he's turning his back on us. This ain't the Pine Hill we grew up in." Caleb paused, debating whether to respond. He understood their nostalgia, their desire to hold on to what they knew, but he couldn't let these sentiments deter him from his purpose. Taking a deep breath, he approached them. "Gentlemen," he said politely, trying to keep his tone calm, "I respect your feelings. Pine Hill means everything to me too. This project, it's about giving our town a chance to thrive, not changing who we are. I just want folks here to have options, to know they can make something of themselves without leaving home." The men exchanged looks, a bit taken aback by his response. One of them nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Guess I see what you're saying, Caleb. It's just hard to get used to all this change." Caleb nodded, his expression earnest. "I get it. Change is tough. But this place, this community center, it's meant to bring us together, not push anyone away. And if y'all have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. This is for everyone." The men softened, and though they didn't say much more, Caleb sensed that they were starting to understand. Winning over everyone wouldn't be easy, but he was committed to showing the town that the community center and scholarships were just new ways of caring for the place they all loved. Over time, Pine Hill began to feel the positive effects of Caleb's efforts. The young scholarship recipients returned, bringing fresh ideas and new skills that enriched the town. Community events flourished, bringing people together in ways they hadn't experienced before. More and more residents started volunteering, organizing activities, and mentoring the younger generation. One evening, at the center's monthly family night, Caleb sat quietly in a corner, watching the scene unfold around him. Families laughed and played games, children showed off their projects, and friends gathered to catch up. It was everything he had hoped for, and more. As he sat there, Anna Montgomery approached and took a seat beside him. She watched the crowd with a satisfied smile. "It's beautiful, Caleb. You've built something truly special here." Caleb nodded, his heart full. "I couldn't have done it without your family's support. I'm just glad folks are finding a place here, a chance to make this town better for the next generation." Anna looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You know, my father wanted to create something that would last, but he didn't know how. You showed him that kindness and community can leave a legacy greater than any business empire." They sat in silence, watching the community thrive. Caleb felt a sense of peace, knowing he had stayed true to his values and honored the spirit of Pine Hill. Through all the challenges and skepticism, he had remained steadfast, creating something that would carry on long after he was gone. As the night wound down, Caleb felt a deep gratitude for the journey he'd taken, the people who had supported him, and the community that had given his life meaning. Pine Hill had changed, yes, but in the best possible way. As the community center and scholarship fund continued to thrive, Caleb felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The changes he'd helped bring to Pine Hill were visible everywhere he looked. Young people returning from college, families gathering at the community center, and the once fading spirit of the town rejuvenated. But just when everything seemed to be settling into place, an unexpected obstacle surfaced. One morning, as Caleb was reviewing plans for an upcoming community event, he received a call from Mr. Langston, Richard Montgomery's associate. The tone of Langston's voice was uncharacteristically tense. "Caleb, I'm afraid there's something we need to discuss," Mr. Langston said, his words clipped. "There's been a recent downturn in one of Mr. Montgomery's major investments. As a result, he's reconsidering some of the charitable projects we've been funding, including Pine Hill." The news hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. "Wait, are you saying he might pull the funding?" Mr. Langston paused, his hesitation clear. "I'm afraid so. Mr. Montgomery still wants to help, but he may not be able to sustain the same level of support. It's a decision that he doesn't take lightly, I assure you. However, we felt it best to prepare you for any changes." Caleb's mind spun as he tried to process the implications. The community center was still new, and many of the programs depended on the funding. Without it, Pine Hill's revitalization would grind to a halt, and all the dreams he'd nurtured for the town's future could slip away. "Thank you for letting me know, Mr. Langston," Caleb replied, his voice steady but tense. "Please, ask Mr. Montgomery to give us some time. I want to explore every possible option to keep things running." Langston agreed to pass on the message, but Caleb could tell the situation was serious. As he hung up the phone, a mixture of determination and worry surged within him. He couldn't let Pine Hill's progress unravel, not when they'd come so far. Over the next few days, Caleb gathered with community leaders, friends, and volunteers, sharing the news and brainstorming ways to keep the center and its programs alive. Some residents suggested local fundraising efforts, while others proposed reaching out to nearby towns and charitable foundations for additional support. One evening, as Caleb sat alone in the community center's rec room, Anna Montgomery walked in, her expression solemn. She had heard about her father's decision, and it was clear she shared Caleb's disappointment. "I'm so sorry, Caleb," Anna said, sitting beside him. "I know this wasn't what you expected. My father's hands are tied right now, but I'm here to help in any way I can." Caleb nodded, appreciating her honesty and support. "Thank you, Anna. I just can't stand the thought of losing this place. The town needs it. We've already seen what it can do for people here." Anna's eyes softened, and she placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll find a way. I believe in what you're doing, and I know the community does too. Let's rally together and explore every possible avenue." Caleb and Anna organized a town meeting, inviting residents to brainstorm solutions. The turnout was overwhelming, with everyone from teenagers to grandparents filling the room, determined to protect the community center that had become a symbol of hope and unity. Ideas flowed, some ambitious and others simple, but each one filled Caleb with a renewed sense of purpose. They discussed hosting monthly fundraising events, seeking out local businesses to sponsor programs, and establishing a board of volunteers to oversee operations and minimize costs. One of the teens Caleb had met at the center, a bright kid named Jake, suggested a community market. We could sell crafts, homemade goods, and local produce. People from other towns might come, and we could raise a decent amount. Others chimed in, offering to help bake, create crafts, or promote the events. The sense of camaraderie and determination filled Caleb's heart. He realized that this center was no longer just his dream, it belonged to everyone in Pine Hill. As the community pulled together, the first fundraising event, an outdoor market and fair, became a huge success. People came from neighboring towns, drawn by the atmosphere and the chance to support a cause that had captured so many hearts. Vendors sold handmade items, Local musicians performed, and children laughed as they played games set up on the center's lawn. Caleb watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride as he saw the joy and energy that filled the air. This was what he'd envisioned, a place where people could come together, united by a common purpose. The community center wasn't just a building, it was the heart of Pine Hill, a place where everyone's efforts combined to create something greater than any one person could achieve alone. As the months passed, Pine Hill's community center grew stronger, bolstered by the support and creativity of the townsfolk. The scholarships continued, albeit on a smaller scale, with locals pitching in to keep the fund alive. The center's programs adapted, leaning on volunteer work and local resources, but the spirit of the center endured. One afternoon, Richard Montgomery made a surprise visit to Pine Hill. He had heard of the town's resilience, of how they had taken his initial investment and turned it into something sustainable and lasting. He found Caleb at the center, organizing supplies with a few volunteers. "Caleb," Richard greeted, his expression filled with genuine admiration. "I came to see what you've built. I hear it's become quite the success, even without our full support." Caleb looked up, a mixture of surprise and appreciation on his face. "Mr. Montgomery, I wasn't expecting you. Thank you for everything. None of this would have been possible without your family's initial support." Richard walked through the center, watching the children playing, the teens studying, and the adults socializing in the gathering rooms. "You've done something remarkable here," he said, turning back to Caleb. "This community center has become much more than a project. It's a testament to the strength of the people here and to your leadership." Caleb smiled, humbled. "It's not just me, it's everyone in Pine Hill. They took ownership of this place. They made it their own." Richard nodded, visibly moved. "I'll see to it that the Montgomery family provides additional support moving forward. You've shown me what true community is, Caleb. I don't want to just fund a building. I want to support the spirit that you've cultivated here." The news spread quickly, and the townspeople celebrated the renewed partnership with the Montgomery family. It felt like a victory, a validation of everything they had worked so hard to achieve. As the years passed, Caleb continued to oversee the community center, though he gradually handed responsibilities to the younger generation. The scholarships grew, sending more students off to college and bringing new skills and opportunities back to Pine Hill. The center became a legacy, a beacon of resilience, generosity, and unity. In the quiet moments, Caleb would often sit on the porch of the center, watching the bustling activity and remembering the day he'd stopped on a lonely road to help a stranger. That single act of kindness had sparked a journey he never could have imagined, leading him to become not just a helper, but a leader and a symbol of hope for Pine Hill. Through it all, he stayed true to his values, building a place where everyone could belong, a place that would outlast him and carry on the spirit of community for generations to come. As he looked out over the thriving town, Caleb felt a profound peace, knowing that the legacy he'd created wasn't just about the buildings or the programs, it was about the people he'd touched, the lives he'd changed, and the home he'd helped preserve. In the end, his journey proved that one act of kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change lives, build dreams, and create a legacy that would stand the test of time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you the best stories.